Good evening and happy Friday. My name is Shana with the Trade Exchange. I want to go over with you the weekly recap because we had so much going on this week. On Tuesday, we had our motor vehicle sales report, came out lower than expected. On Wednesday, big news, the FOMC minutes. We got to take a look at those, and they were a much more hawkish tone than what we saw from the Fed meeting on March 15th. So now they're not just talking about possibly 2 or 3 interest rate hikes, but they also want to begin reducing the balance sheet of $4.5 trillion worth and reinvesting that back into the market. So that's going to have a significant impact. And Janet Yellen herself said that this could be equivalent to an interest rate hike. So a lot of big things going on with the FOMC, a much more hawkish tone than what was originally portrayed or the perception that we received and many's received from the Fed meeting on March 15th. Today we had non-farm payroll, and non-farm payroll numbers came out 96,000 versus the 180,000 number that was expected. Much lower than what was anticipated, much lower. And that's being blamed on the retail space. As we know, retail has been taking a hit. And we're going to get more into that in just a minute. First, I want to go over the major indices with you, and show you where things closed out, because you're going to see there wasn't a lot of change from last week where things closed. So let's pull those up so you can take a look. You can see the Dow closed out 20,656. That's down only 0.03% from last week. The S&P closed out 2355, down just 0.2% from last week. NASDAQ closed down just 0.5% last week at 5877. Oil closed out 1256 spot 10, so that's up just spot 3% from last week. But gold, as you can see, if I pull this up right here, you can see gold did have continued to tick up a little bit. It closed out up to spot 8%, closing out at 52.31, so it's still above the $50 a barrel level. If we take a look at our 10-year, let's pull that right back up because I just had that up. 10-year closing out this week 2.382. It makes sense, honestly, that the 10-year yield is still low. We had a lot of turmoil in the markets. We have a lot of people wondering what's going on. We have our president meeting with the Chinese president this week, President Xi Jinping, talking about possible trade agreements and their stance on North Korea. So there's a lot to be wary of, a lot to watch. There's a lot to see what's going on. On top of that, we had the United States launched a missile attack on Syria last night, as we all know. So there's a lot of things that investors in the market could dramatically change on. And so a lot of investors are watching this. You can see the volatility number, 12.87. It's still low. With the possibility of the healthcare reform bill, it's still in the works, as we know. We heard Speaker Paul Ryan talk about it yesterday. They are still working on this. So a lot of changes could be coming up in the near future, and the marketplace is keeping an eye on this, trying to figure out what's going on, because all of these changes, the trade agreements, the political landscape, can have a dramatic impact on where things head. So until then, it appears that the 10-year yield is not growing significantly. We're closed out again this week 2.382. If we take a look here, I want to pull up Ralph Lauren, because great retail topic to speak about. We can see here, Ralph Lauren on April 4th announced they were going to be closing their main flagship store in Manhattan. Store I personally love, but they are closing it. And it's very interesting, because it's not interesting just in the fact that we do know that retailers have taken a significant hit, but it's also a great conversation piece on what's going to happen to commercial real estate in Manhattan. We have these large retail flagship stores across Manhattan, and as we know, in the past few years, they have began to suffer in a way. Commercial real estate is down in New York, and these retail stores are starting to feel the pressure of the rent of Manhattan. And you can see it here. Ralph Lauren says, it's not worth it to keep open this flagship store anymore. We're going to close it down. Their stock did drop following that news, as we can see in their stock chart. It did come back up. It has trickled down a little bit again. But again, it's a very interesting topic, because now we had non-farm payroll today. Numbers are low, and what did they say? They say this is because of retail. And it's going to be interesting. Our entire landscape is changing. When we talk about autonomous vehicles, we're talking about Amazon testing out grocery stores, and we have college students. There was an article featured in Bloomberg saying that 44% of college students graduating are taking positions that don't even need a college degree. So it's very interesting, because here we are, as we know, with the problem of saddling on students with these student debt loans straight out of college, and now we're seeing numbers that 44% are obtaining jobs that don't even need a college degree. We compound that with the retail space being dramatically hurt as people are moving on to online shopping. And then we also compound that with the shift towards autonomous vehicles, towards possibly having grocery stores that are another autonomous grocery stores. And so we have a huge shift in our landscape as technology is continuing to improve. And so it's very interesting to see that these non-farm payroll numbers came out so much lower than expectations. Something else that was great big news this week was Panera Bread. Panera Bread, great fast restaurant, I guess you could call it, fast service restaurant. And they are getting bought out by JAB Holdings. So we know JAB Holdings, they own Krispy Kreme, and we can see the big spike that Panera Bread had following the announcement that they will be bought out by JAB Holdings. So great news for Panera Bread and for JAB Holdings. So I just want to touch base on that because that was another big thing that happened this week. I want to thank you all so much for watching. We're going to follow up and see what happens next week. We had a lot going on between the Syrian missile strike with find out what happens in the remarks coming out from President Trump and President Xi Jinping and see what happened there. Were any trade agreements met? Where do we have any big changes? So it's going to be very interesting to watch. And keep watching this volatility number. As we know, volatility is low, but it makes sense with how dynamic and how volatile the economy is right now that we don't know what's coming next. We have healthcare reform bill. It's still back in action. We heard House Speaker Paul Ryan talk about it yesterday. So they are still working these things out. So it's going to be very interesting to see what transpires in the next couple of weeks because as we know, we are still in the first 100 days of our new presidency with President Trump. I thank you all so much for watching and we will be back with you next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.